Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are diving deep into the strategic future of managed services. Accounting, payroll, HR, all those outsourced functions as we look toward 2040. We're viewing this future through the comprehensive lens of the STEVE framework, analyzing the powerful confluence of social, technological, economic, environmental, and political forces.
Right, and this convergence creates an undeniable pressure cooker. It really forces every firm to, determine their essential strategic axis. It's not enough just to map the trains. You have to choose how you'll fundamentally allocate capital and risk appetite over the next decade or so.
Exactly. And that brings us neatly to the core strategic tension emerging from this foresight. Given the tremendous momentum of strong megatrends like AI and platformization, and the presence of these high-impact wildcards, those unpredictable shocks, where should the industry place its primary focus? Should we prioritize aggressive optimization and rapid adoption of known efficiencies? Or must we focus more on building systemic resilience against those low probability but potentially catastrophic risks?
And I'm arguing that strategic resilience, specifically against those system-breaking shocks, must be the primary focus. Optimization without fortification is, it's ultimately a failure waiting to happen.
And I contend that immediate integration of the known megatrends isn't just preferable, it's actually necessary for survival. Delaying that innovation to focus on hedging against, maybe low probability risks, that guarantees obsolescence in a market defined by speed and value.
Okay, I understand the competitive pressure, I really do, but let me offer a counter perspective on what survival truly means in this context. The core problem, as I see it, is interdependence. The future is defined by systems that are, exponentially linked, economically, politically, technically, and this makes them inherently fragile. A single wildcard event can sometimes in an afternoon undo years of efficiency gains. So if your competitive advantage is built purely on optimizing the current system, you are structurally exposed when that system inevitably fractures.
I see the point on interdependence, definitely. But strategic prioritization requires us to look at the likelihood and the impact, right? The rapid shrinking of the skills half-life, the shift to outcomes over hours, these aren't theoretical anymore. They're happening now. The technological megatrend of human-machine integration, moving from simply using machines to genuinely working with them, requires us to embed generative AI and intelligent automation into our DNA today. If we wait, we miss capturing the value shifting away from manual labor toward supervision and strategy. That, to me, feels like the certain path to failure, not the wildcard risk.
That's a compelling view of the market imperative, I'll grant you that. Yet, it hinges entirely on the stability of the environment you're optimizing into. Let me give you two quick examples from the STEEP framework that argue for resilience over speed. Consider the political wildcard. A sudden legislative ban on outsourcing core fiscal functions, maybe tax prep, primary accounting, driven by, say, protectionism or national security concerns. That would upend the entire industry overnight.
Okay, that is a dramatic scenario.
It is. But if you spent the last 5 years solely optimizing contracts for pure efficiency, you have zero strategy for rapid operational repatriation. Resilience demands systems designed for structural flexibility from the outset. Now, look at the social wildcard, a global AI trust crisis. Imagine a massive bias scandal erupts where automated decision-making, maybe in hiring, maybe financial eligibility, is proven discriminatory at a huge scale. Public confidence in automation just vanishes. This forces an immediate, mass regulatory and ethical audit of every automated process in managed services, globally. That single event could render your competitive AI platforms effectively useless until they can somehow prove ethical integrity.
I absolutely acknowledge the severity of those wild cards, but this is the classic strategic tension, isn't it? Do you slow the engine down to armor the hull, or do you accelerate because speed itself is maybe the best defense? I lean toward acceleration because I believe technology is already working on solving or at least mitigating the trust problem.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that technology inherently solves the trust problem, not when the level of automation is escalating so rapidly.
Well, I think it absolutely does. Or at least it provides the necessary foundation. Consider the technological drivers we're seeing. Blockchain for immutable auditability, distributed ledgers for transparency, low-code, no-code platforms democratizing innovation while inherently tracking changes. Cybersecurity as a service is standardizing proactive defense. We can build trust and achieve exponential efficiency simultaneously through these converging tools. The market is practically demanding a technological solution to opacity.
That assumes transparency is the same thing as trust, and it's really not. The major strategic risk isn't simple task automation anymore, it's what some are calling judgment automation. That's where AI starts taking real-time financial or HR decisions, often without direct human intervention. When an erroneous or biased decision affects millions, simply showing the audit trail via blockchain is, frankly, cold comfort. That is the AI reliability crisis wildcard waiting to happen. Prioritizing the speed of deployment over rigorous human-in-the-loop ethical audits seems strategically reckless to me. Resilience must mean verifiable, proven ethical integrity before efficiency gets deployed at massive scale.
But waiting for verified, perfect ethical integrity, that's strategically debilitating. We have to adopt an iterative approach. Fail fast, learn, regulate iteratively. Furthermore, the economic megatrend of value-based models, that whole shift to XaaS, anything as a service, is non-negotiable now. Clients are paying for measurable results, not hours clocked. Platformization and these new models are really the only way to deliver the scale and efficiency the market requires. We absolutely must optimize for those outcome contracts.
That's an excellent point about the value-based model. But I challenge its structural viability, if or when major systemic failures occur. Think about the wildcard scenario of a collapse of a major national fiscal system, or maybe a serious currency crisis. What happens to your carefully crafted outcome contracts when the very system they rely on for valuation, the currency, the tax laws, the national regulatory body, is invalidated or enters a period of hyper-instability?
Okay, that is the ultimate test of centralized fragility. I agree.
Exactly. That scenario would require a total, probably global, tax and financial reconfiguration. Optimization suddenly ceases to matter when the foundation itself shakes. Survival does. When the rules change that fundamentally, resilience in systems that allow rapid pivoting, like maybe decentralized contract models or more localized operational footprints, becomes paramount.
While the risk of centralized fiscal collapse is certainly real, I would argue that the economic system itself is already pivoting to mitigate this, largely driven by that continuous pressure for efficiency you mentioned. We see emerging weak signals that could soon become trends, things like cryptocurrency payrolls, real-time cross-border payments via blockchain. These are by their nature more decentralized, less state-dependent economic structures. So aggressive adoption of these decentralized tools is arguably a resilient strategy against centralized fiscal collapse. The market is already hedging its own bets in a way.
That's a compelling idea that decentralization itself is a form of inherent resilience. But aren't you just trading centralized fragility for massive regulatory fragmentation? If you adopt, say, 5 different crypto payroll systems across 5 jurisdictions, you potentially create 5 new compliance nightmares. The complexity of governing decentralized finance within a managed services context is enormous. Are we truly reducing risk here, or are we just shifting it from a low-probability, high-impact event like fiscal collapse to a maybe high-probability, high-volume operational crisis like compliance chaos? I tend to argue the latter demands dedicated resilience planning, not just rapid platform building.
Compliance is an operational cost, yes, and a trend we manage. A currency crisis is systemic shock. We have to prioritize based on the magnitude of the threat, surely. Moving away from purely fiscal risks for a moment, let's focus on the environmental and social dimensions. The market is increasingly demanding mandatory sustainability. That's clear.
Agreed. Sustainability is definitely no longer just a nice-to-have.
Right. Companies absolutely must integrate things like carbon accounting and real-time ESG telemetry, the live tracking of environmental, social, governance data, into their core services. The generational shift expects purpose and authenticity, and investors demand measurable non-financial performance data. This is a known, measurable optimization target. It's happening.
Okay, while green taxation and ESG mandates are crucial, simply complying feels reactive, not strategically resilient. My deeper concern here is around human capital. True systemic resilience involves adapting to the demography of experience, the aging population, and that parallel megatrend of flexible, purposeful work, like hybrid work models. The ultimate resource collapse for managed services, I believe, could actually be a skills collapse.
But if we aggressively optimize through automation, doesn't that help mitigate the skills collapse? We make expertise scalable through AI platforms, reducing the dependence on that deep, often manual expertise of the aging workforce.
See, I think that is a dangerous assumption. If we don't prioritize people-focused resilience, investing massively in continuous learning, maybe like a Netflix of skills as some call it, we fail to properly manage the multi-generational workforce. We risk losing the irreplaceable deep expertise of senior workers while simultaneously failing to equip the younger generation fast enough to actually manage and oversee the increasingly complex automated systems.
That seems more like an internal management issue, though, doesn't it? Not necessarily a catastrophic risk on par with, say, a legislative ban.
But it becomes the ultimate systemic fragility because it makes the entire operation fragile. If we become over-reliant on automation and let deep human expertise atrophy, then when that AI trust crisis hits, referencing back to our earlier point, and you suddenly have to pull the plug or significantly curtail automation, you might no longer have the human capital capable of running these complex, essential functions manually or semi-manually. The skills deficit itself becomes the functional wildcard that brings things grinding to a halt.
Okay, this discussion really highlights how tightly interwoven all these deep factors are. A social failure can absolutely cascade into a technological and economic shutdown. However, I must reiterate my position. Strategic optimization remains the core mandate for survival and growth. We must proactively prototype and aggressively adopt the most powerful converging forces, human-machine integration, and the clear mandate for value-based outcomes. Because speed determines relevance in this market. If you wait for the disaster, you might lose the crucial decade of innovation required to implement these complex, efficiency-driving systems effectively in the first place.
And my position holds firm that the greatest strategic failure in this complex interdependent future will be ignoring those systemic risks inherent in rapid complexity. True success in 2040, I believe, means building systems fortified against the high-impact social and political wildcards, the trust crisis, the regulatory shocks. Ethical resilience and human capital robustness must be achieved before we chase peak efficiency. Otherwise, we risk simply building the fastest, most fragile system possible.
Well, the tension between optimization and resilience is clearly the central challenge for strategic leaders in managed services looking ahead. We both agree, I think, that the future is highly interdependent and certainly full of surprises.
Indeed. So, for those listeners currently drawing up their strategic maps for 2040, the lesson might be less about trying to perfectly predict the future.
Yeah, I would say, don't just predict the future. Prototype it aggressively, capturing every possible value shift along the way.
And I'd add, maybe prioritize the simulation of potential catastrophic futures too, so that when the unexpected inevitably happens, you're not just resilient, but you're strategically ready to adapt and perhaps even lead.